Okay, technology's on our side on this sunny Sunday morning. Well, it goes without saying, it's a pleasure to be here. I've been introduced already, so I'll tell you a little bit more about myself. That's with my pre-COVID haircut, I might say, due tomorrow. It's been quite difficult getting one. So, I've been principal at Abbey College, Manchester for a number of years, and I've worked at the college for 21 years. And as you can see in the bottom corner, we're celebrating our 30th anniversary this year. Now, from the inception of the college, we have had a lot of students whose core theme and dream has been to get into medicine, dentistry, veterinary science, and other medically related courses. And that's really the heart of where the college started. Moving forward today, we have students who come to us to do GCSEs, A-levels, to resit their A-levels, resit their GCSEs. And we also have a lot of international students as well who come and do our A-levels, come and do our International Foundation programme. And still a core theme for us is students who want to get into medicine, and I think this is a key area of expertise for the college. So I don't need to tell you that getting into medicine is competitive. We know it's competitive and we know it's a long journey, and that's already been illustrated by Abdul in his first slide. There are many hurdles on the way, and I think it's very important that you consider backup plans, alternative routes, and as Abdul said, is medicine really the course for you? You do need to be really clear about that. And I think moving forward, as you start your studies, in terms of your research, it's so important. And that's why having things like your work experience, your voluntary work, having research, that's why it's all so important that you do that, because you need to know what you're going in for. And you also need to know that the universities are very experienced at selecting students who they feel are suitable for the course. So let's move and start at GCSE. So some of you may be just about to embark on a GCSE journey. You may be doing your GCSEs now. So which subjects should you choose? Well, it goes without saying that you're going to need to do maths and English, absolute core subjects, not just for medicine, but for any course you want to do at university. Now, science and an interest in science is clearly important. The separate sciences would be preferable if you're able to study biology, chemistry, and physics as separate sciences. But I do understand that at some schools and the school curriculum and what's available, that may not be possible. So double science as core and additional, or the trilogy, obviously is also acceptable. However, if you do study the double science, you won't have studied the full GCSE. So that does mean that there are some disadvantages for you moving forward to A-level. Now, in terms of other options, again, a range of subjects to show versatility. It's very important that you show you've got your different sides of your brain that you can use. So something creative, a language, a humanity, an art subject. It's important to show that range. If you are looking as well at wanting to be a surgeon later down the line, then dexterity is important. So those subjects where you're showing those things. But I think for most schools, they will give you an option where you will choose a humanity, maybe a language, an art subject, and other subjects that sort of link in. Again, it does depend on the school curriculum and subject availability, but it is good to get a spread of subjects. So what GCSE grades are you going to require to get into medicine? Now, the universities set the minimum standards that they require. So it's very important that you look on the UCAS system for the year of entry that you want to apply for and look at the criteria. Now, I have researched through the criteria, as I would every year, to look how they have varied, what the main areas are. Now, it does vary significantly between different universities. Some universities might say they'd want English and maths, and they don't really require other things specifically. However, typically, you're looking at 5 subjects, including maths, sciences, and English, but some universities require 7 subjects. Some universities want 6 minimum grades in English. That's in the new GCSE gradings, as we've moved away from the A star to C, D, E, F, G system. So they want a 6 in English and maths, but some want higher and some don't specify, as long as it's a pass. So most require grade 6 in sciences. So when I'm saying to you, what grades will I require? I can't give you a full, clear, explicit answer to that because it does vary a lot. What I would say though is that what you need to do is do the best you can do and try and get the best GCSE grades that you can. Because although a minimum may be stated, this may not be sufficient in terms of competition. If you imagine that there are a certain number of places and the number of people applying for it are 5 times the number of places, 6 times the number of places, there's got to be various ways of eliminating certain applications, and GCSEs will be one of them. Mainly because when you actually apply in the main, they are the only qualification that you've actually got. Everything else is based on your forecast or your predicted grades, unless you're making a post-results application. So, as I said, it's important to research and don't be fooled by lower minimum standards and think that that's going to be okay and that you don't need to try hard in your GCSEs, because you do. It's really important to get the best that you can get. So what happens when you get your GCSE grades? So that will be happening to you, and may already have happened to you if you're in year 12. So generally, if you have got good GCSE grades that are strong enough from A-level, then you can sail into the sixth form. Normally, at most schools, you're requiring a 6 or a 7 as the minimum to carry on with a subject or a related subject. Now, again, entry criteria into sixth form do vary between different institutions, and that will vary between schools and colleges. But that's the general sort of level. And what I would say is that if you're not at a 6 or a 7, then you are going to struggle at A-level, and you're not necessarily going to transform the grade into an A-level grade that would be suitable for medicine, at least for first-time entry. Now, if your maths or English is below the requirements, then you could consider a resit of that subject in year 12. I would be quite concerned if you were a scientist and you needed to resit GCSE maths. That does ring some alarm bells in terms of moving forward with those science subjects. But we do often find that we may find a very scientific student whose English is below the requirement, and therefore a resit in year 12 would be perfectly acceptable. Now, if all your subjects are below the requirements, in other words, if you've scored mainly 5s and 4s, 3s, then you do really need to consider whether you need to resit your GCSEs, and that is possible at some institutions and some colleges. That's something we do at Abbey College, or whether you should be pursuing an alternative route such as a BTEC and going down a different route. That doesn't mean eventually you can't get to where you want to be, but you have to remember that the requirements for GCSE for A-level are there because A-levels are difficult. So, you've got into the sixth form, you're about to go into the sixth form. What A-level should you choose? So you need to study 3 A-levels. That is the minimum number of A-levels you need to get into almost all universities, but certainly for medicine. Again, look carefully at the requirements set out by the universities. And again, they do vary quite considerably. However, for almost all universities, they want 2 sciences are required. They're looking at chemistry and or biology being compulsory. Most prefer both, but not always. There are some restrictions on the 3rd subject from some universities, and general studies and critical thinking are not accepted. So I think the important thing is to look at those subjects carefully. Now, what A-level grades are you going to require? So for first-time candidates, in general terms, the range to get into university is AAB up to A-star AA for a first-time candidate. The majority want AAA. So if I look across all of the universities, AAA is sort of the general first-time offer. Now, there are widening participation and contextual offers that are lower if you're eligible. So if you live in a particular postcode, if your parents haven't been to university, if you're on a certain income bracket, then you may well be eligible for widening participation schemes and a contextual offer, which means you may get a lower offer, which may be ABB, for example. May also take into account differences in your GCSEs. Remember, and this has already been mentioned, UCAT and or BMAT are required for most medical schools. So depending where you apply, you may need to sit both of those tests. And I know that's going to be covered later, but you do need to consider that that is like another element that's added on to your A-level study in year 13. Not just your A-levels, but doing that extra test as well. So what subjects should you consider when choosing your A-level subjects? Well, the subjects that maximise your choice of medical schools are biology and chemistry. Interestingly, some medical schools do not require biology and will take other sciences. But I would ask myself the question, why wouldn't you choose biology if you want to study medicine? Surely biology is an integral subject to studying medicine. I know not all of biology is human. If you don't do human biology A-level, most schools offer biology which covers some plant biology and so on. But the way that chemistry and biology interlink, the chemistry overlap as well, I think it's very important. And I would err away of not choosing biology unless there's been a particular circumstance. The other thing to do when you're choosing your third subject is to think about your strengths from GCSE. Think about your aptitude. I know that not all students who want to study medicine are necessarily the best scientists. You're not necessarily the natural scientist. That doesn't mean you're not good at science, but a lot of people I see have very strong strengths in other areas. English literature, for example, religious studies, a humanities subject, a language, even subjects like art. So I think it's important to look at what subject you can choose that you're going to do well in, because it also may give you a route into an alternative course down the line if you decide that medicine's not right for you. You're 15 or 16 when you're looking at this option. You're very young. So if those are not the right, it's not the right pathway in the end, having another subject you really enjoy is good. Obviously, if you're a brilliant mathematician, then do maths. But if you're not, don't struggle through a third science just because you think a third science is required, because it isn't. The other thing is to think about how the workload, how do the subjects complement each other? So for example, if you do something like art, it has a huge workload in terms of the portfolio. And to reach the top grades, you're going to have to do an awful lot of work. That is why sometimes people do choose the subjects, say, biology, chemistry, psychology, for example. Psychology is a science. Psychology has a lot of biology in it, has a lot of statistics that would be in biology, has a lot of the same methodologies as science. So in that way, your skill set's not being stretched quite as far in different directions. Some people say to me, well, is a subject like any third subject is acceptable apart from the critical thinking and general studies, but there are some A-levels that are seen as more heavyweight academic. And those subjects include history, geography, economics, the other sciences, psychology, so I think you do need to think carefully about that third subject. Do you need 4 A-levels? The answer is simply no. I know that some schools do pursue 4 A-levels. I think that can work for some people. And I think the combination of biology, chemistry, maybe maths and further maths would work for a lot of people. But the way that linear A-levels are, and I'll talk about that in a minute, the workload is very heavy and 4 A-levels are not required. And for example, if you were doing biology, chemistry, maths and further maths, a lot of universities will not accept the maths and further maths with one of biology and chemistry in the combination. So you do need to be careful about that. What you don't want to do is dilute your efforts by doing 4 A-levels when that's not necessary. So I've talked about A-levels and I'm now introducing the term linear A-levels. Linear A-levels are studied over 2 years and they're called linear A-levels because basically you take all the exams at the end of 2 years. The system they replaced was a modular system where exams could be taken along the way, scores could be banked and units could be retaken. That is no longer the case. So the way I would describe to you a linear A-level, a 2-year A-level, is a bit like going on a long-haul flight. You get on the aeroplane, on the runway, in the start of year 12. And remember, when you start year 12, you're only year 11 who's had a holiday. You haven't really done any work since you finished your GCSEs. And in this particular academic year, there's been an even bigger gap. Now, that's not your fault and everyone's in the same boat. But it is important that you jump onto the airplane and you're on the runway and you get off the ground quickly. GCSEs and A-levels are very different. GCSEs have been made more challenging, but A-levels, by the nature of them, you're only doing the 3 or maybe 4 subjects instead of perhaps doing 7, 8 or 9. So you've got to imagine each A-level's the equivalent of 3 GCSEs in terms of the amount of study that's required. So on your long-haul flight, you need to be up and off the ground. Your knowledge and skills are built from the very start. You've got to build the foundations and develop that right the way through. There is no chance to slack off, to not do your work, to say, oh, well, I can work harder later. It just doesn't work. You've got to be on board straight away. Now, you're not going to get up to an A grade for quite a while. Might be a little bit easier in some of the topics where there's more right and wrong answers, but you're not going to build the type of high-level analysis, the evaluation, all of those sort of synthesis skills that are required at the top grade. And they will build over the 2 years. So imagine on your aeroplane, you're getting up to 10,000 feet, to 20,000 feet, to 25,000 feet. And sadly, this summer, for students who were not able to sit their A-levels, they actually never got to 35,000 feet because they didn't do all that work that was required for the final exams. Now, the other thing I want to mention about A-levels, and I don't mean to sound doom and gloom, but not everyone can get top grades. So unlike some educational systems where if you achieve a certain percentage, you will get the grade, the A-levels are norm-referenced. So when everyone sits the A-levels and all the scores are there, lines are drawn to basically make sure that there is a certain number of A stars and A's, B's, C's, D's, E's, and so on. So the differentiator between the top grades can be quite low, and there may not be many marks between an A standard student and a B grade student. So I think that's always important. I think that's one for mums and dads as well, that you want your students, your sons and daughters, to do the very best they can, but they are in competition with everybody else as well. So I think I've emphasised that you need to be on top of the subject and content from the very start in order to be able to build your A-level studies. Now, whilst you're at school or college, you're not just doing your A-levels. You're wanting to develop your profile as well in other ways. So you've got the chance to develop what we call transferable skills, those all-important skills that are required to be an effective doctor, to be good in those kind of roles. Teamwork, leadership, interpersonal skills, empathy, all those other skills, dexterity, they're transferable. Now, you can be developing those through your normal subjects, but you can also be developing those by doing extracurricular activities, by joining clubs, societies, anything else that you can do. Take the initiative, say you want to start something yourself. All of those things add value to your A-level performance as well. What we find is that students that do a lot of extracurricular activities often perform about 10% better in their A-levels than those that don't. And this is aside from any voluntary work and sort of work that's going to be talked about later that you can do to pursue your medical knowledge and the fact that you show you want to work in a medically related environment. So it's very important to take a hold of those things as you carry on. You know, a busy person's often a more successful person. However, you do need to not let these things take away from your study time and that learning and that core development right from the beginning in your A-levels. So you get to the end of year 12. What happens if it hasn't gone to plan? Now, this can often happen. So I would say that most schools and colleges are going to require some kind of pass in their college exams at the end of year 12 to go into year 13. If you have not passed your college exams in year 12, then you don't have the foundations for carrying on. So what you've got to do is think to yourself here, why has year 12 gone wrong? Why am I not at the level I'd like to be? Do I have the basic knowledge to move into year 13? Should you consider resitting year 12? And will your medical application be supported, or will you need to do a post-results application? So at the end of year 12, if you are scoring in a C kind of zone, then that may be that's fine. And moving forward, your school can see your potential moving on. But it's very difficult to do an application by the 15th of October and forecast A's if you're sitting on a C at the end of year 12. So you need to think about how that's going to pan out moving forward with your application. Because remember, the competitive deadline is early. Unlike the other UCAS deadlines you can apply later, you do have to be on top of everything like that at that time. Now, for a lot of you, year 12 will go wonderfully well, and you'll be sailing into year 13, moving forward in exactly the right direction. But you do need to think about if it isn't at the level. Obviously, what you can do is just carry on and get your A-levels. And even if your school won't support a medical application at that stage, that's fine. You carry on, you apply for something alternative, and you do the very best you can. And at the end, if you get your A's, you can do a post-results application. It's much better to apply with your A-levels rather than apply as a resit in a way if you think you're going to get those better grades. Now, if you do apply for post results, then at that point, your A-levels trump your GCSEs. They are your trump card because you're holding those as your main qualification. So you do your A-levels. What happens if your A-level results fall below the required offer? We've talked already that the main requirements are AAA. We've said that there are other offers which may be higher, A star AA. We've also said there may be some lower offers, AAB, and some contextual offers. So there will be a range of offers that you're achieving. So what happens if you don't get your A-level results, the grades you require? So you've got option one is opt for an alternative course or your backup plan. An alternative course could be a biomedical sciences type course. It could be something else. You might have decided during your journey that medicine's not for you and you want to do your backup plan. You might decide you want to study abroad. So if you can go to a European university, which will require lower A-level grades and you'll need to sit an entrance exam. So that may be a way forward. And the advantage, obviously, of moving forward, even if it's not into the medical degree at that moment, is that you're moving forward on your educational journey and you can still make your way towards medicine. The disadvantage, obviously, of moving forward is you're not doing medicine and the other route may not lead to medicine. There's no guarantees of doing, say, a post-results application for medicine after you've done a biomedical sciences degree. That's not guaranteed. So you have another possible choice. You could resit one or more of your A-levels. So the advantages of resitting one or more of your A-levels, depending what grades you've got, are you have another chance of getting the grades you need. And at the same time, you can strengthen yourself as a scientist, strengthen yourself as an A-level student, which is then going to help you when you go to university to do a better job of your degree. The disadvantage is that not all universities will accept resit students. A lot will, but some won't unless you've had an extenuating circumstance. So an extenuating circumstance during your A-levels could include the fact that there had been a death in the family, that you yourself had been ill at the time of the exams. There can be other circumstances at that time. So you would need evidence for that to present to the university that you had an extenuating circumstance. But there's a long list of universities that will accept resits. And I think at this point, you need to be also pragmatic. And you need to think, I want to do medicine. Do I need to be too picky about which university I go to? And the answer is no. Go to the university where it looks like you've got the best chance of being able to get in with the profile that you have got. Now, I know there might be some international students on the webinar today, so I'm just going to give a little bit of advice for GCSE students, for international students. Obviously, if you come and study your GCSEs here or in your home country, then you can follow the same route of GCSE or its equivalent and then do A-levels either at home or in the UK. You can do GCSE equivalent and follow a year of level 3 study in your home country. So that would make you 17 years old by this point. Then you could come and follow an international foundation medicine program at a college or a university. So for example, at Abbey College, we have an international foundation medicine program, which quite a few students follow that gets them into certain universities. But universities as well have their own foundation medicine programs, and you can study there with the view to trying to get into that university. My only word of advice there is that if you don't get in, then that qualification is not going to get you into another university. So that's where a college course or a school course can be better. Now, for those of you who are international, like home students who need their GCSE English normally to 6 or above, you're going to need an IELTS score of 7 or 7.5 overall to gain entry to a UK medical school. And of course, if you want to study in the UK, you will need a student visa, and that will include EU students moving forward. So what are the alternative routes to studying medicine? If you have got lower A-level grades, Then you could consider a degree with a foundation year. That would be a way of moving forward. That would give you an alternative to resitting A-levels. You could do a biomedical sciences degree and go down the postgraduate route, which is what my goddaughter has done. She's done a biomedical sciences degree, got a first, and then gone into medicine. She's starting this September. For international students, I've already mentioned the International Foundation programs, the medicine pathway that a lot of international boarding schools such as ourselves offer. And you could even switch from A-level to a foundation halfway through your A-levels if the A-level route was not going in the best way planned. So thank you for listening. If you've any questions, I know they can be on the chat. And I hope it's been helpful. You know, as you can see there, signposting, there's an awful lot of, you know, different factors to consider. But I mean, just the fact that you're on this conference today and what Abdul and Imran are doing here to support you is wonderful, because there are so many signposts to navigate when you are on your road to medicine. So thank you.
Oh, all right, Liz, thanks for that. It's been a very useful talk. We've got a few questions from our viewers. Probably one of the most fundamental ones. They're asking, how does the new grades compare to the old grades? How does the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 compare to A, B, C, D, E, F? They're asking.
Yeah, that's a really good question. So the old grades, we had A star, A, B, C, D, E, F, G unclassified. The new grades are from 9 to 1. So a 9 is kind of like an A star plus, if you like, and an 8 is an A star. A 7 is an A. So the 7 is the A, and that's where that translation across to A-level comes in. That obviously what you get at GCSE, it does translate through to A-level many times. So a 7 at GCSE is probably likely to correlate to a B. It could go to an A and it could go to a C. Now, if you get a 6 at GCSE, that's equivalent to a B, and a 5 is a high C and a 4 is a low C. So they're kind of differentiating a bit more on the C boundary than they used to. 3 2s and 1s are passes, but they're not at the C level.
Okay. All right. And a question here for Dr. Mannon. And Dr. Mannon's our local COVID lead. Students are asking, how can they go about work experience and volunteering during the COVID pandemic? Because obviously a lot of those opportunities, the traditional opportunities in hospitals aren't there anymore.
Sure, that's a great question, actually, Imran. COVID-19, of course, has been with us since late February, early March, and that has kind of railroaded the effort as regards to volunteering, work experience, and so forth, things that are actually essential with regards to applying to medical school and other courses. It's an important part of the personal statement, and very importantly, it's the kind of culture, the personality it creates really in terms of a person who wants to go on and do medicine. So it's important. And of course, COVID-19 means that people have not been able to go and in person attend work experience, such as working with a doctor's surgery or perhaps an attachment in the local hospital, and helping out at the hospice, working with charity organizations, care homes, and so forth. Understandably, because we want to reduce footfall in those places, especially due to the fact that we are dealing with people from vulnerable categories, people from shielding backgrounds, people from, who have chronic disease and various other, medical problems. And so it's important that we shield our patients from colleagues and students and so forth, so that we're not overexposing them to the presence of people and potentially the spread of COVID-19. So there's a very good reason as to why that's been curtailed. Unfortunately, what it means that the availability of work experience and volunteering has been reduced. Now, we have to think outside the box, and we have been doing that from the deanery perspective, from the local academy perspective in East Lancashire. And this is what we have been saying to our students, which is try to look at alternative ways. I think the interviewers, the entry officers for universities will have a sympathetic view on this when it comes to reading personal statements in 2020, in 2021. And I'm expecting COVID-19 to live with us for the next 18 months, 24 months easily. So therefore, it does involve, it will be part of our lives over the next couple of years. So it's important to think about how we are going to achieve volunteering, work experience, and so forth. So have a think about virtual work experience. Already many trusts are providing that. You know, there are hospitals. I know in terms of priority, we have to look at clinical work and so forth and safeguarding of colleagues and patients. But I know that hospitals, GP surgeries, and various other medical facilities are looking at virtual experience where you can join your tutors, your supervisors remotely. You can actually get involved in examinations, in discussions, in conferences like this, so that you can get a feel for and understand clinical medicine in a slightly different way. I don't think it's the same as the practical offering. There's no doubt about that. But you can do things in a different way. Now, charities, for example, I've noticed in the charity sector that they have involved people in a different way. Just like colleagues, workers, people within those organizations are having to work in a different way. If you volunteer for organizations and work with them, they will find alternative platforms. I'll give you an example. Our local hospice, we used to run the befriending scheme where people physically met up with our patients. Now they have developed the virtual befriending scheme, so you can befriend somebody virtually. So people who have access to the internet, tabs and so forth, they're able to access freely, of course. Now, patients who are not able to do that, the hospice is helping them out in learning how to access Skype and other WhatsApp platforms and things like that on their own equipment. Where equipment is needed, there's places where equipment is being provided for sections of the community so that they can stay engaged with the rest of us. So there's all sorts going on like that, to my knowledge, and we are doing that locally as well. I don't know if that helps. Perhaps you can elaborate. Liz, do you have any ideas?
Yeah, I mean, I think that it's really, really difficult at the moment, but I do think that there are certain things that are set up, even like you say, online volunteering and helping people in a different way. And that goes back to the school scenario, that I think there are opportunities in your schools and college setup to try and do things where you're supporting. So you might support other students, you might mentor, you know, they're all in that kind of helping category. And that's where I said on that slide really about taking every opportunity you can at school. Now, I know that, again, they're a bit more limited at the moment, but taking the initiative, one of our students has just said, I want to start a chemistry club so that I can support the new year 12s with their chemistry. Well, that's perfect. Even if you're doing it online, that is still something where you're helping and supporting and empathizing. And I think those are the kind of things that you could do through that setup. But like you said, Abdul, I think at the moment is difficult. I think there are some virtual work experience opportunities on some university websites as well, aren't there, which students can tap into. And reading around this, I mean, making a diary about COVID and how the impacts that it's had. You know, I mean, we know that for all students this summer, we've had an impact of COVID. People didn't sit their GCSEs or their A-levels. How is that impacting? Reading about how things have, you know, how everyone's responded, keeping a kind of a diary of how that's developing and having an understanding, because we're going to be moving into a new normal, whatever happens, aren't we? And I think that having that empathy and understanding and really in-depth look at it is really important too.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Okay, thanks, Liz, for that. Liz, some students are asking, what if they've got non-science-based A-levels, or I think one student is asking, well, I've done A-level Spanish. Does that affect my options of getting into medicine?
Well, it will do, depending on the other options you've got. So this particular student, if they've got A-level Spanish and they've got biology and chemistry, then that's absolutely fine. No problem at all. But I do occasionally get people that come to me and say, you know, I've done my A-levels, I've actually got 3 A's, but I haven't got the right subject. I haven't got chemistry, or I haven't got biology. And actually, the way to do it is to just take that subject and get the chemistry or the biology. Because if you've got Spanish, English literature, and say maths, you've got a science, but you haven't got the biology or the chemistry. And I do quite frequently get people coming to me saying, can I just do one subject in a year? You know, because I haven't got that in my profile.
Okay, good. I think I'd just like to add to Liz. We did a bit of research on this earlier on in the year. Most medical schools want two science subjects, including chemistry. So chemistry, biology, chemistry, maths, chemistry, physics. There is an increasing minority that doesn't want chemistry anymore. For example, East Anglia, Anglia Ruskin. I haven't got the whole list in front of me. But if you were one of these students that only have one science, so for example, you only have A-level chemistry, then one option is to go for like a foundation year medicine course. We can discuss this with the university representatives that are joining us shortly. Also, there's a lot of you asking about graduate entry medicine. Our conference is aimed at undergraduates, but we'll try and fit that in at some point. Because there's a significant number of you, asking about moving from, I think, nursing over to medicine. We know that's something that the government is encouraging as time goes on. Increasing number of students are asking about moving from biomedical sciences over to medicine. So that's something that we can hopefully fit in at some point. And Liz, I think there's a question here about what if you've got if you've got lower, if you want to try and get a lower offer, is there anything that students can do?
Well, as I said, I think there's the widening participation schemes, and there are certain universities that do that. And again, you can research those. And if you live in a certain area as well, you might be eligible. I think you have to live in the area. You need to link in with that university. And it really is about your kind of background profile, your postcode. It's about whether your parents have been to university, whether your income, the household income. So there are those factors. And I have supported students on widening participation schemes, contextual offers. And indeed, those can go down to ABB. On occasion, so I think that's well worth pursuing.
Yeah, and we've got Dr. Hack coming on shortly from the University of Manchester, who leads the widening participation forum there. So he will be able to talk about if you're from disadvantaged backgrounds, or whether if you fit that criteria, how to apply and how you can use that pathway. There's just a quick question for Dr. Mannon. There's a student asking whether the fact that she's not doing A-level maths is going to disadvantage her when she's doing the BMAT examination.
So that's a good question. We come across this often during the BMAT courses and the UCAT courses that we do. Some students genuinely have a fear with regards to the quantitative sections, the maths knowledge required for those tests. So it's a genuine concern. And I would like to reassure this young lady who's asking the question in that the maths level required to navigate UCAT, to navigate BMAT, is actually based at the GCSE level, or in Scotland, the equivalent, which is the Scottish SQA Highers. So you don't have to have done maths at an A-level stage. So do not worry. If you are thinking about medicine, the chances are you'd have got at least a grade C and above in maths at GCSE. So you should be able to navigate and deal with those type of questions that come up in UCAT and BMAT for that matter. So absolutely no concerns there whatsoever.
Okay. All right, okay.
We have a couple of questions on Facebook, Imran. Can I introduce those?
Yes, sure, yeah.
Liz, how much, this is Susan asking the question, how much emphasis is placed on predicted grades? So I presume she's asking about predicted grades when we apply to medical school. Okay,
so your predicted grades are really important. And I think that, medical schools, and I mean, obviously I'm not an admissions tutor, but what I see is that if you don't have the predicted grades that are required, it's highly likely you may get rejected before we even move to the next stage. But colleagues may counter that when they talk about their own particular universities. But in general terms, they are important. And I think that, again, you've got to look carefully at what the predicted grades required are at particular universities. So if you are a candidate who isn't an A-star, it's not looking like an A-star, then really it's not a wise plan to apply to somewhere that requires an A-star. It just isn't, because they will ask for the A-star. And sometimes you might drop a grade and you get in, but you're reducing your chance. But what you've got to try and do is reduce the risk. What I would say is always try and reduce the risk. And it's like, Imran, you said earlier about some universities don't require chemistry anymore, and that's fine. But you are then limiting your choices. And so you're putting more sort of, hope on getting to a university that doesn't want chemistry. So yes, your forecast grades are important. And I know that any school will look at the forecast grades or look at the student. This is October. What could this student potentially do? Yes, of course, they'll probably, if you're a good candidate, predict the grades you require. But I think, again, this was a little misunderstanding that happened this summer. What you put as a predicted grade, let's say 3 A's, it doesn't mean that you're necessarily working at 3 A's at that moment. And so actually when it came to those centre assessed grades that we had to do, people were kind of surprised that they didn't just get their predicted grades as their centre assessed grades, because they're not the same thing. They could only be done on the data that you were given. On that point, just to diverse, I sort of just go slightly off a tangent. I'm sure some students are worried about what might happen next summer. Will the A-levels, will people actually be able to sit them next summer? Will they sit the GCSEs, or could what happened this summer happen again? I'd just like to say, I think that it's highly unlikely that the government would want that to happen again. And I think they may well push the timings of the exams back a bit. But I just would say that if it did happen again, and it could happen again, make sure that that's why I was saying about working all the way through, that so that all the evidence that you've got that you're presenting to your school is that always you've tried your best, you've done your best in all your tests and assessments, so that if that data isn't required, then you've done the best you can, and don't slack off. And I know that's hard, but you've really got to be dedicated.
Thank you very much, Liz. Imran, I'm conscious that there's absolutely loads of questions coming through. But we do need to stick to the program, I guess. So, can I, before I hand over to you, Imran, can I, on behalf of Blue Peanuts, on behalf of myself, Imran, and all of us joining the conference, Liz, we would like to thank you for joining us and enlightening us on the requirements for GCSEs, A-levels. I'm sure I speak on behalf of everybody. It was fantastic. Your presentation was brilliant. I've learned something today, definitely. And I'm sure all of us have learned a lot. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you. It's been my absolute pleasure. I hope the rest of the day goes brilliantly. And any more questions that you want me to answer, just put those through and I can do those later. And have a great day. Thank you very much. And I'll say bye from me.